This is video 1.9 and we are talking about the distance formula and the midpoint formula along with graphing circles. You'll notice distance and midpoint are target number 13 for this chapter. Now right now you just need to watch, you don't need to write anything down, and I just want to start by talking about where the distance formula comes from. So if we go ahead and we take a look at a graph, and we just plot 2 points anywhere on that graph. Now we don't have a scale, so we don't know their values. We can say the first point, we'll call it x1, y1, and we'll call the second point x2, y2. Now if I want to find the distance between those 2 points, hopefully you're thinking about the fact that we could draw a right triangle and use the Pythagorean theorem. Now, the length of the bottom here is going to be the difference between your y values, x2 minus x1. The length of the vertical line is going to be the distance between your y values, y2 minus y1. So now, if we think about the Pythagorean theorem for a minute, and again, you're just watching, you don't need to write this down, but we can do the Pythagorean theorem, which says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So d is like our c squared, our hypotenuse, and if I take x2 minus x1 and square it, I'm going to add it to y2 minus y1 and square it. Remember, the goal here is to find the distance. So if I take the square root of all that to get the distance, you can see that the distance is going to equal that big old formula we just came up with. That's how we derive the distance formula. It really just comes from the Pythagorean theorem. Now again, just watching, in terms of the midpoint, we want to find the point right in between those two. So we're looking for this point right in between there, the middle. Now, the middle in terms of the x's, hopefully you're thinking that the middle of the x's is just going to be the average of them. So if you add them together and divide by 2, that's going to be the average of the x's. And again, you can just watch right now. We'll formalize these definitions in a minute. In terms of the midpoint on the y's, again, it's just the average or the middle of the y's. So we just have to add them together and divide by 2. And so that shows you the 2 formulas that we're going to be looking at today and how to get them. Now, just to know them, remember the distance given 2 points. So here's that same formula. Subtract the x's and square them. Subtract the y's and square them. You'll take the square root of all that. The midpoint is just the average of the x's and the average of the y's. Don't forget, midpoint is a coordinate, so it's written in x comma y form in the end. Now that we have those 2 formulas, let's go ahead and practice with them. So here's the first one. We want to find the distance and the midpoint between these 2 points. So starting with our distance formula, the distance formula, remember, just tells us to take the square root, and now we'll subtract the x's. So I'm going to do -1 minus 3. That answer will be squared. And we're going to subtract the y's. So we'll say 4 minus -2. And that answer will also be squared. Now you could do it the other way around, so you could switch them and have the second point come first, as long as you do it in the same order both times, just like when you're finding slope. So you could have done 3 minus -1 and -2 minus 4. You'll get the same answer in the end. If I continue now, I get -4 squared plus 6 squared, and I recommend just kind of doing the simplifying here by hand and not grabbing your calculator right away. You'll get lost in negative signs and parentheses. -4 squared is 16, and 16 plus 36 gives us a total of 52. So we'll leave this in terms of square roots mostly, so we get the square root of 52 as our answer. You could also find that square root, it ends up 7.2. We'll say 7.2. And so that's the distance between those 2 points. In terms of the midpoint, remember to find the midpoint. We're going to go ahead and find the average of the x's. So we're going to add those two x values together and divide by 2. And we'll get 2 over 2, which simplifies to 1. And we'll also average the y values. So we'll do 4 plus negative 2 divided by 2. And that averages out also to 1. So it looks like the midpoint here is 1, 1. And we've now found our distance and our midpoint. The second part of this video is reviewing circles and graphing circles. Remember, the equation of a circle is given here, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. H comma k is the center and r is your radius. So if we took a look at our first example here, we want to write the equation of a circle with a center of 3, -5 and a radius of 2. So we'll just plug that information right into our equation. Now our h is 3, so remember we're going to have to take the opposite of that and get x minus 3 squared. Our y is -5, so our y turns into y plus 5 squared. And our radius is 2, but remember you have to square the radius. It equals 4. And there's the equation of the circle. Going the other way around, given the equation and we want to make the graph, now two things I like to start with. The first is knowing where the center is. The center, it looks like, is going to be at 2, -4, using the h and the k from the graph. And the radius is going to be 3. Remember, the 9 is the radius squared. I just want the radius. To graph these, I like to start by plotting a point at the center. Now, this isn't actually going to be a point on the graph. I just like to use it to help me. So we'll go to 2, -4. Now, that's my center. From there, I like to go 3 units out in all 4 main directions. So I'll go up 3 units because that's the radius, out 3 units, down 3 units, and out the other way 3 units. Now, those are the points on the graph, so we'll erase that center there. And now we want to actually draw this equation. So we will take those points and connect them to make a circle. We'll just draw the circle by hand. And there's our circle. All right. Now I want you to try 2 of these. Here's your multiple choice question. The first is finding the distance between those 2 points. The second question for today is to find the midpoint between those 2 points, and that's your free response for your Google form. And bring these to class tomorrow, and that's the end of our video.